Ham, Kush, and the origins of black people in the Bible. Under the vast sky of ancient times, where great rivers wound like silk ribbons connecting civilizations, a story was passed down from generation to generation, through sacred scriptures recorded in ancient books and oral traditions shared among tribes. It is the story of Ham, Kush, and the origins of black people in the Bible, a tale that is both mystical and rich with profound lessons about humanity, honor, justice, and truth. It all begins in the era following the Great Flood, when the old world had been wiped away and humanity was reborn through Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Japheth, and Ham. Among these lineages, Ham was the one who carried within him boldness and courage, but also bore a mysterious curse from his father. But did this curse truly exist, or was it merely a misunderstanding distorted over time? From Ham, new nations emerged, and among them, Kush, one of his sons, laid the foundation for one of the most powerful empires in ancient African history. The Kushites, with skin as dark as the desert's night, built magnificent cities, pyramids that defied time, and a glorious culture that rivaled any other civilization. They were not only warriors but also traders, rulers, and architects of the future of an entire continent. However, history has not always been fair to the descendants of Ham. Centuries later, his story was twisted and exploited to justify oppression. The institution of slavery weaponized the Bible, using the story of Ham to impose chains upon black people, branding them as eternally cursed. But was this truly the case? Did God predestine a people to suffer? Or was this a ruthless distortion by those in power seeking to maintain their dominance? Ham, Kush, and the origins of black people in the Bible is not just a story of the past. It is a journey in search of justice and the truth that has been hidden. It is the story of a people once forgotten but never erased. Part 1, Prologue, an Ancient Mystery. Our story begins at a mysterious moment in human history, after the Great Flood, when the wrath of God had wiped away the old world, leaving only one family to survive aboard a massive ark drifting across the endless sea. Atop Mount Ararat, the colossal vessel gradually dried under the first rays of sunlight following the cataclysm. Noah, a faithful man chosen by God, along with his wife and 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, stepped off the ark, setting foot on dry land once more. Before them lay a desolate world, where every trace of the old civilization had been erased. They were the only humans left, bearing the responsibility of rebuilding humanity from the ground up. After months of wandering on the waters, the winds now carried the warmth of new life, but also concealed the mysteries of the future. Noah and his family pitched tents, cultivated the land, raised livestock, and from there, a new generation of humanity began. But God did not merely bless them. He also decreed the destinies of their lineages. Shem, the eldest son, was destined to become the ancestor of a great nation, from which prophets and bearers of divine missions would arise. From his lineage would come Abraham, Moses, David, and ultimately the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Japheth, the second son, was blessed with expansion, giving rise to powerful nations, explorers, warriors, and rulers who would spread across the west and the north. He would become the progenitor of peoples who would excel in military strength, culture, and knowledge. But what about Ham? He remains one of the most controversial figures in history, described as dynamic, bold, and highly adaptable. He was also involved in a mysterious event that led to unique prophecies regarding him and his descendants. From Ham's lineage, great empires such as Egypt, Kush, Nubia, Babylon, and many African civilizations would emerge. The prophecy regarding his descendants was not merely a judgment, but a key to unlocking the secrets of humanity's development. Would they be able to overcome their fate, or would they remain bound by the curses of the past? As Part 2, Ham, the controversial son. After the Great Flood, when the land had dried and humanity embarked on a new era, Noah's family gradually settled into their new life. They farmed, built, and sought to survive on a land purified by the floodwaters. One of the most significant tasks Noah undertook was planting a vineyard, a symbol of a new beginning, of the rebirth of civilization. As time passed, Noah, one evening after harvesting his first grapes, made wine from his own vineyard. For the first time in his life, he drank wine, a fermented beverage previously unknown. But this very wine led him into an unprecedented state of intoxication. The defining moment. Noah lay in his tent, naked and unaware of his surroundings. Whether by accident or fate, it was Ham, the middle son, who entered the tent and saw his father in this shameful state. In ancient cultures, seeing one's father naked was not merely a private incident, but was considered a severe insult to a father's dignity. Some scholars even suggest that Ham's actions went beyond just seeing. Perhaps he mocked, ridiculed, or even acted with greater disrespect. Instead of keeping the matter private, Ham went outside and told his two brothers, Shem and Japheth, possibly with a tone of mockery or disrespect. In contrast, Shem and Japheth showed reverence toward their father. They took a garment, walked backward into the tent, and covered their father's body without looking directly at him. The mysterious curse. When Noah awoke and learned what had happened, he was enraged. However, strangely, he did not curse Ham directly but instead cursed Canaan, Ham's son. Cursed be Canaan. The lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. Genesis 9 verse 25. This raises a significant question. Why did Noah curse Canaan instead of Ham? Several theories have been proposed. Some suggest that Canaan might have been involved in the act of disrespect or that his character reflected that of his father, leading Noah to foresee the consequences for his descendants. Others believe that the curse was not a punishment but a prophecy regarding the fate of Canaan's lineage, who would later become enemies of Israel and be conquered in history. The descendants of Canaan eventually became the ancient Canaanite tribes, including the Hittites, Jebusites, and the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah, lands of great sin that God later destroyed. A historical misinterpretation. For centuries, this story has been misunderstood and misused. In particular, during the era of the transatlantic slave trade, some people twisted this story to justify the enslavement of black people. They falsely claimed that Noah's curse applied to all of Ham's descendants and, since Ham was considered the ancestor of many African peoples, this supposedly meant that black people were destined for servitude. However, this is a completely false and distorted interpretation. The curse was not directed at all of Ham's descendants, only at Canaan. In reality, the Canaanites were not the ancestors of Africans but primarily a people residing in the Middle East. Ham's lineage included not only Canaan but also Kush, Egypt, and Put, peoples who later built powerful civilizations such as Egypt, Kush, Nubia, Babylon, and Carthage. These societies produced kings, warriors, and great architects. Part 3, Kush, the founder of a mighty empire. After the Great Flood had passed and the world entered a new era, the descendants of Noah began to spread across the land, establishing new territories and forming new nations. Among Ham's descendants, one stood out above the rest: Kush, a man destined to become the ancestor of a powerful, resilient lineage that would leave a profound impact on human history. Kush's journey, the pathfinder. Kush, a strong and determined man, was gifted with both strength and wisdom to pioneer new lands. He and his lineage migrated southward to a fertile region along the banks of the Nile River. This was the land where some of Africa's earliest and most magnificent civilizations would be built. The land where Kush settled corresponds to present-day Sudan and southern Egypt, a resource-rich area where the Nile provided water and fertile soil for agriculture. It was here that the kingdom of Kush, one of the greatest ancient civilizations in the world, was born. The kingdom of Kush, the light of Africa. Not long after settling, Kush's descendants began building an empire filled with prosperous cities, grand monuments, and a rich culture rivaling that of the Egyptians. The Kushites were not only fierce warriors but also skilled merchants, scientists, and artisans. They controlled key trade routes of ancient Africa, exchanging gold, ivory, precious woods, and gemstones with other civilizations, from Egypt to Mesopotamia. The kingdom of Kush became renowned for its wealth and power, making it a significant cultural and commercial hub in the ancient world. But what made Kush truly remarkable was its deep connection with Egypt. For centuries, the Kushites and Egyptians were both rivals and allies, sometimes engaging in trade, sometimes in war. At one point in history, the Kushites even conquered and ruled Egypt, establishing the Black Pharaohs of the 25th dynasty, a defining moment in African and world history. Nimrod, the prominent son of Kush. One of Kush's greatest descendants was Nimrod, who later became known as a mighty hunter before the Lord. Nimrod was not just a fierce warrior, but also the founder of great cities such as Babylon, Nineveh, and other powerful centers of influence. These cities were not only economic hubs but also centers of artistic, scientific, and political development, laying the foundations for future empires. Nimrod's contributions to human history remain undeniable, and he is remembered as one of the most significant figures of the post-flood era. The Kushites in the Bible. The Kushites were not only prominent in history but were also mentioned numerous times in the Bible. In the Old Testament, the land of Kush was described as a distant yet wealthy place, and several significant biblical figures were connected to Kush. Some scholars believe that the Queen of Sheba, who visited King Solomon, may have had origins in Kush or Ethiopia. The Kushites also appeared in the prophetic books of Isaiah and Jeremiah, where God spoke of the fate of the nations in the region. In the book of Acts, a royal Ethiopian eunuch, likely a Kushite, was converted by the Apostle Philip, becoming one of the earliest Africans to embrace Christianity. The legacy of the Kushites. Although the kingdom of Kush eventually declined due to wars and historical upheavals, its legacy remains eternal. Their pyramids still stand in modern-day Sudan, serving as a testament to the creativity, resilience, and greatness of a people who once shaped history. The descendants of Kush were not limited to Nubia or Sudan. They spread throughout Africa, becoming the ancestors of various tribes and peoples across the continent. They carried with them a warrior's. Part 4. Nimrod, a hero of history. In the vast currents of ancient history, some figures emerge not just as mere humans but as symbols of power, ambition, and transformation. One such figure was Nimrod, the son of Kush, whom the Bible describes as a mighty hunter before the Lord. But Nimrod was more than just a hunter. He was the first in human history to build great cities, lay the foundation for mighty empires, and possibly become one of the first kings of the post-flood world. 1. Nimrod's origins are a lineage of power. Nimrod was born into a powerful family, the lineage of Kush, grandson of Ham, and great-grandson of Noah. From an early age, Nimrod exhibited strength and ambition far beyond those of his contemporaries. As the post-flood world was still in its infancy, Noah's descendants were spreading across the land, forming small tribes and settlements. But Nimrod did not want to merely survive, he wanted to rule. He refused to be a nomad or a farmer like his ancestors. Instead, he gathered people, conquered lands, and built great cities. 2. Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. One of the most striking descriptions of Nimrod in the Bible is, Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Genesis 10 verse 9. This phrase carries multiple interpretations. Some scholars believe Nimrod was truly an exceptional hunter, skilled at capturing wild beasts and protecting people from danger. However, many others argue that this was a metaphor, suggesting that Nimrod was not merely a hunter of animals but a conqueror of men and lands. Nimrod was not only a great hunter, but also the first to establish political and military order, something unprecedented in human history. 3. The first builder of great cities. Nimrod did not stop at hunting or ruling small groups. He established the first cities of mankind, laying the groundwork for civilization. According to the Bible, Nimrod built and ruled over Babylon, Erech, Akkad, Calneh in the land of Shinar, Mesopotamia. These were not just settlements but the first centers of power in history. The cities he founded became cradles of civilization, where writing systems, legal codes, sciences, commerce, and military structures first emerged. Among them, Babylon stood out as a legendary city that would later become one of the greatest empires of the ancient world. 4. Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, a symbol of ambition. One of the most famous stories associated with Nimrod is the Tower of Babel. When Nimrod built Babylon, he did not just aim to create a powerful city. He sought to challenge God himself. According to the Bible, Nimrod and his people decided to build a tower reaching the heavens, aiming to make a name for themselves and prevent humanity from being scattered across the earth. However, this act defied God's will. God had commanded Noah's descendants to spread out and populate the earth, not to concentrate in one place. In response, God confused their languages, causing them to no longer understand one another. This forced them to disperse across the world, leading to the creation of different nations and languages. Although this story carries mythological elements, it reflects a profound truth. Nimrod was the first to defy God through his boundless ambition. He did not just want to be a king. He wanted to become a godlike figure, a symbol of absolute power. 5. Nimrod's legacy. After Nimrod's time, civilization continued to evolve. The cities he built became the foundation for great empires such as Babylon and Assyria. Even after his death, his name lived on in legends and history. Various cultures outside the Bible also mention Nimrod under different names. In Mesopotamian mythology, he is linked to Gilgamesh, the legendary king who undertook heroic journeys. In Jewish tradition, he is often viewed as a tyrant king, but also as one of the greatest founders of civilization. In Islamic tradition, he is seen as a ruler who defied God, yet remains an Part 5. The Kushite Empire and Egypt, a grand legacy. The blazing sun hovered over the desert sky, casting brilliant rays onto the mighty Nile River. The hot wind swept across the golden dunes stretching endlessly, yet beside the legendary river, life flourished with extraordinary vigor. Here, an empire was rising, a civilization that would change the course of human history forever. That empire was not only Egypt but also Kush, the powerful kingdom to the south, where the descendants of Ham, Noah's controversial son, gave birth to a mighty lineage. For millennia, Kush and Egypt were both allies and rivals, two nations intertwined like two sides of a coin, one representing the radiant light of Egyptian civilization, the other embodying the resilient strength of the black warriors from Nubia. The origins of a mighty lineage. After the Great Flood, Noah's descendants spread across the land, establishing new territories. Ham, the ambitious and strong-willed son, fathered Kush, Egypt, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan, four lineages that would later give rise to some of the greatest civilizations in history. Kush, a tall man with dark skin, as deep as the sun-scorched earth, led his tribe southward, crossing grasslands and deserts, eventually settling in a fertile land along the Nile. There, a new civilization was born, the Kingdom of Kush, also known as Nubia. But the Kushites were not alone on this journey. To the north, another group, also descendants of Ham, established their first cities along the river, laying the foundations of Egyptian civilization. The first pharaohs of Egypt, who united Upper and Lower Egypt and built the earliest pyramids, carried the bloodline of Ham. Though they emerged from Mizraim, Egypt, their lineage was mixed with the Kushites, the powerful warriors from the south. Under the reign of Narmer, also known as Menes, considered the first pharaoh, Egypt rose to power, becoming a vast center of civilization. But Kush was never overshadowed. The Kushites were not mere silent neighbors. They were providers of gold, ivory, precious woods, and elite warriors to Egypt. When Egypt and Kush ruled the world together. For centuries, Kush and Egypt shared a complex, symbiotic relationship. They engaged in trade and cooperation at times, while at others, they faced off on the battlefield. The Kushites, known for their archery skills and fierce loyalty, were highly sought-after mercenaries in the Egyptian army. During the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose I, Egypt launched a military campaign southward, conquering Napata, a key city in Kush, and turning the region into an Egyptian province. Kushite princes were taken to Egypt, educated in the royal courts, and trained in Egyptian customs, but they never forgot their homeland. For 500 years, Kush was under Egyptian rule. Yet, despite this domination, the Kushites preserved their culture, language, and religion, patiently awaiting their time to rise again. When the Kushites became pharaohs, over time Egypt weakened. Civil wars, invasions from the north, and the collapse of dynasties plunged the nation into chaos. This was the moment the Kushites had been waiting for. Around 750 BCE, a Kushite king named Pi decided he could no longer watch Egypt descend into ruin. He assembled a formidable army, crossed the Nile, and marched into Thebes, the spiritual heart of Egypt. The Egyptians, exhausted by war and turmoil, welcomed Pi as a savior. Pi did not merely conquer Egypt. He established a new dynasty, the 25th dynasty, also known as the Dynasty of the Black Pharaohs. Pi and his successors, including Shabaka, Taharka, and Tantamani, ruled over both Egypt and Kush, forming a vast empire stretching from the Nile Delta to Ethiopia. Under Kushite rule, Egypt was revived. They restored ancient temples, built new monuments, and repelled invaders from the north. Pharaoh Taharka, one of the greatest Kushite rulers, led Egyptian forces against the Assyrian invasion, earning his place as a legendary warrior king. But even the greatest empires eventually fall. In 671 BCE, the Assyrians invaded Egypt, overthrowing the Kushite pharaohs and forcing them to retreat back to Nubia. Though they lost Egypt, the Kushites continued to thrive, establishing a Part 6, the Kushites in the Bible. The Nile River flows, carrying with it the stories of the past. The land of Kush, with its silent pyramids rising from the desert, was once home to pharaohs, warriors, and merchants. But beyond the legends of gold and power, there is another story, the story of the Kushites in the Bible. Here, they appear not only as mighty warriors but also as wise leaders, powerful kings, and even figures chosen by God to fulfill His divine will. A powerful people in the Bible. The Kushites were not only mentioned in historical records but also appeared multiple times in the Bible, sometimes as allies, sometimes as rivals of Israel. The name Kush is used in several biblical passages to refer to the land south of Egypt, a land of strong warriors, abundant wealth, and fearless people. In Isaiah 18 verses 1-2, the land of Kush is described as follows. Woe to the land of whirring wings beyond the rivers of Kush, which sends envoys by sea in papyrus boats over the water. The Kushites were not just a distant people but a formidable force, capable of influencing the world of Israel. When the Kushites helped Israel. During times when Israel faced many enemies, some Kushite rulers emerged as protectors, assisting God's chosen people. One of the most striking examples is the story of Ebed-Melech, a Kushite who saved the prophet Jeremiah from imprisonment during the reign of King Zedekiah of Jerusalem. At that time, Jeremiah was thrown into a deep cistern, where he was left to die of starvation. While many Israelites ignored his suffering, it was Ebed-Melech, a Kushite, who risked his reputation and life to plead with the king for Jeremiah's release. Seeing his faithfulness, God promised to protect him from destruction when Babylon invaded Jerusalem. Ebed-Melech, I will rescue you on that day. You will not be given into the hands of those you fear. Jeremiah 39 verses 16-18. Ebed-Melech's actions not only demonstrated kindness but also revealed that the Kushites had a special role in God's plan. When the Kushites fought against Israel. However, the Kushites were not always allies of Israel. Some Kushite kings waged war against God's chosen people. In 2 Chronicles 14 verses 9-15, the Kushite general Zerah led a massive army to attack King Asa of Judah. Zerah's army consisted of 1 million warriors and 300 chariots, a force powerful enough to crush any kingdom. But King Asa, a righteous king who feared God, prayed, Lord, there is no one besides you to help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, Lord our God, for we rely on you. God responded, and Zerah's army was utterly defeated, forcing the Kushites to flee the battlefield. This event highlights the military strength of the Kushites but also serves as a lesson that earthly power cannot always prevail against the will of God. Was the Queen of Sheba a descendant of Kush? One of the most legendary figures associated with Kush in the Bible is the Queen of Sheba. Sheba was a wealthy kingdom, famous for gold, spices, and precious stones, located south of Egypt. Some scholars believe that the Queen of Sheba may have been a descendant of the Kushites, as Sheba's territory had close ties to Nubia and Ethiopia. Her story became legendary when she embarked on a grand journey to meet King Solomon, known for his unmatched wisdom. Imagine a mysterious queen, riding on camels laden with treasures, arriving in Jerusalem to test Solomon's intellect. She posed riddles and challenges, but the Israelite king answered them all. In the end, the Queen of Sheba was not only astonished by Solomon's wisdom but also recognized the greatness of his God. Before leaving, she bestowed upon Solomon the finest gifts of her kingdom, gold, frankincense, and precious jewels. Her story is not just a diplomatic encounter but a symbolic connection between the Kushites and Israel, between Africa and the Middle East, between worldly power and divine wisdom. The Kushites, a people acknowledged by God. Throughout the Bible, the Kushites appear not only as warriors, but also as figures with significant roles in God's divine plan. At times they were enemies, at times allies, but they were always described with strength and respect. In Psalm 68 verse 31, there is a hopeful prophecy about Kush. Envoys will Part 7, Prophecy and its Meaning. A gentle breeze sweeps across the vast golden dunes of ancient Africa. Beneath the boundless sky, the Nile River winds like a silver ribbon, carrying the breath of thousands of years of history. The ancient pyramids, the remnants of the Kushite and Egyptian empires, still stand tall, guarding the secrets of time. But amidst these weathered stones, a story echoes through the centuries. The story of Kush and the descendants of Ham, a people once oppressed, forgotten, yet destined to be restored and blessed according to God's prophecy. A curse or a prophecy? It all began one fateful night, when the new world was being rebuilt after the great flood. Noah, the man chosen by God to save humanity, and his family established new settlements. In the joy of renewal, he planted a vineyard, harvested its ripe grapes, and fermented wine. But wine was something never before known, and when Noah drank it, he became intoxicated. He lay inside his tent, unaware of what was happening around him. His son Ham happened to enter and saw his father in a state of nakedness. But instead of keeping it a secret and protecting his father's honor, Ham went outside and mockingly told his brothers, Shem and Japheth. Shem and Japheth, understanding the gravity of the situation, took a cloak and walked backward into the tent, covering their father without seeing his exposed body. When Noah awoke and learned what had happened, he uttered a prophecy. A curse upon Canaan, Ham's son. Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. Genesis 9 verse 25. But why was Canaan cursed instead of Ham? For centuries, this story has been misinterpreted to suggest that all of Ham's descendants, including Kush, Egypt, and Put, were cursed, but that is not the case. The curse was directed only at Canaan, whose descendants would later establish Sodom, Gomorrah, and other kingdoms that opposed Israel. Kush, another son of Ham, was not included in this curse. On the contrary, he became the forefather of one of the greatest African civilizations, whose brilliant legacy spanned millennia. The Kushites in prophecy. Although the Kushites endured periods of Egyptian domination and brutal wars, the Bible shows that they were never forsaken. In Psalm 68 verse 31, a powerful prophecy is mentioned. Envoys will come from Egypt. Kush will submit herself to God with outstretched hands. What does this mean? This prophecy foretells that, despite their struggles and conquests, the Kushites would ultimately be blessed by God. This nation, once warriors, conquerors, and at times enemies of Israel, would return to God, be restored, and receive his favor. Another fascinating prophecy appears in Isaiah 11 verse 11, where God declares, "In that day the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea." This means that even in their darkest times, God never forgot the Kushites. He had a plan for them. The restoration of Kush, when prophecy becomes reality. History proves that, despite thousands of years of turmoil, the Kushites never disappeared. They once conquered Egypt, founding the 25th dynasty, the dynasty of the Black Pharaohs, ruling from the Nile Delta to Ethiopia. They continued to thrive after Egypt's decline, establishing the city of Meroe, which became a great center of civilization, known for its pyramids, writing system, and exquisite art. Even after the fall of the Kushite kingdom in the 4th century AD, their descendants survived among the African nations of today. And most importantly, the Bible says they would return to God. Many scholars believe that Christian communities in Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Sudan today trace their roots to Kushite ancestry. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian churches in the world, has preserved its faith since the early days of the New Testament. This suggests that prophecy has already been fulfilled. The Kushites have lifted their hands to God. Part 8. Misinterpretation and Historical Discrimination. The wind whispers through the vast plantations, where calloused, sun-scorched hands toil from dawn till dusk. The crack of whips echoes, eyes filled with despair, and souls silently pray in the darkness. A grim reflection of millions of people enslaved under brutal oppression for centuries. Yet, there is one injustice greater than chains, the distortion of history, the manipulation of the Bible to justify these atrocities. No one could have imagined that an ancient story from the time of Noah, a curse upon Canaan, would be twisted into a weapon of oppression, turning an entire continent into victims of one of the darkest chapters in human history. A curse turned into shackles. The story began thousands of years ago, when Noah cursed Canaan, the son of Ham. This curse was not directed at Ham, nor at all his descendants, but solely at Canaan, whose lineage would later settle in lands that Israel would conquer. Yet, as time passed, this story was manipulated and distorted by those with malicious intent. During the Middle Ages, as Europe began expanding across the world, rulers and slave traders sought justification for their exploitation, and they found a perfect tool, the story of Ham and Noah's curse. They reinterpreted the story, falsely claiming that Noah's curse was not only upon Canaan but upon all of Ham's descendants. Since Ham was considered the ancestor of Kush, Egypt, and Put, African peoples, they concluded that God had predestined black people for servitude. This lie spread from churches to schools, from books to sermons, poisoning the minds of millions. Slave traders, colonial empires, and oppressive rulers used this distortion to build a ruthless system, where people were turned into commodities, enslaved solely because of their skin color. When Africa became a shackled continent, the 15th century marked the beginning of a dark era. European powers, driven by greed and conquest, invaded Africa with weapons, deception, and fabricated religious justifications. Ship after ship carried Kushites, Nubians, the descendants of pharaohs, and warriors who once ruled the Nile. Now they were chained, packed onto slave ships, and sold like livestock in America, the Caribbean, and Europe. They were labeled cursed beings, born to serve, soulless creatures, all because of a horrific misinterpretation of an ancient biblical story. When these enslaved people reached the New World, they lost more than their freedom. They lost their identity, their culture, their history. No longer were they the descendants of Kush. No longer were they the children of great civilizations. Instead, they were forced to believe they were cursed beings, as dictated by those in power. The great lie exposed. But truth cannot be buried forever. In the 19th and 20th centuries, as the abolitionist movement gained strength, scholars, theologians, and activists began questioning this falsehood. They re-examined the Bible, analyzed every passage, and discovered the truth. God never cursed black people. God never condemned any race to eternal slavery. Archaeological research further proved that the Kushites, the descendants of Ham, were not weak or cursed. They were builders of great civilizations, leaving behind monuments that still stand today. The Kushite pyramids of Sudan, more numerous than those of Egypt, are proof that they were not a cursed people, but a mighty nation that once ruled a vast empire. Their descendants, though stripped of everything, were never destroyed. They rose, fought, reclaimed their freedom, and continued contributing to humanity. Lessons from the past. The story of Ham is not about a curse. It is about how history can be manipulated for power and control. What happened to Kush and its descendants serves as a warning to all of humanity. When a lie is repeated often enough, it can become truth for millions. But Truth, Part 9, Restoring Honor and Justice. Beneath the vast African sky, where the desert winds carry the whispers of the past across the ancient Nubian pyramids, lies a story that has never been fully told. A story of stolen honor, distorted history, and justice slowly being restored. For thousands of years, a truth was buried beneath the sands of time, replaced by lies and deliberate misinterpretations. But today, as the pages of history are reopened, as the light of justice begins to shine upon the darkest corners of the past, the truth is finding its way back. A history distorted for oppression. For centuries, the story of Ham and his descendants was twisted by those who sought control and domination. It all began on that distant night, when Noah, after drinking wine, lay uncovered in his tent. Ham, his son, saw him in this state, and instead of keeping it private, he mockingly told his brothers, Shem and Japheth. When Noah awoke, he pronounced a curse, not upon Ham, but upon Canaan, Ham's son. Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. Genesis 9 verse 25. This curse was never meant for all of Ham's descendants, nor was it intended for Cush or Egypt. It applied only to one lineage. Yet, as time passed, the story was manipulated, transformed into a tool for justifying some of the greatest crimes in human history. During the era of European colonization, this misinterpretation was used to justify slavery, with claims that black people were the cursed descendants of Ham, predestined for servitude. And so, millions of men, women, and children were chained, forced onto slave ships, and sold like commodities. They were ripped from their homelands, their families, and their history. Those who once descended from pharaohs, from Nubian warriors, from great merchants along the Nile, were now reduced to mere laborers on plantations in foreign lands. Yet, physical suffering was not the worst. More terrifying was the theft of identity, the way they were made to believe they were truly cursed, that they were born to serve, that they had no right to justice or freedom. The truth cannot be buried forever. But history never sleeps. Even when buried, truth has a way of resurfacing. As theologians, scholars, and activists began to question the distortions, the light of justice started to illuminate the dark corners of history. Biblical studies revealed that Noah's curse had nothing to do with black people or the Kushites. In fact, the Bible often spoke of Cush with great respect. The Kushites were not cursed. They were a strong, wise people who played a vital role in history. Figures like Ebed-Melech, the Kushite who rescued the prophet Jeremiah, and the Queen of Sheba, who tested the wisdom of King Solomon, were likely of Kushite descent. Most importantly, biblical prophecy declared that Cush would be restored, that they would stretch out their hands to God, and that they would never be forgotten. In Psalm 68 verse 31, a powerful promise is made. Cush will submit herself to God with outstretched hands. Archaeology confirms the truth. Historical discoveries have further unraveled the reality of Cush's greatness. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of a mighty Kushite civilization, where black pharaohs once ruled Egypt, where pyramids were built rivaling those of Giza. Ancient statues, writings, and artifacts confirm that the Kushites were never a cursed people. They were once rulers, warriors, and builders of a vast empire. Justice is being restored. Today, Truth is Part 10. Conclusion: A message for the future. The African sun sets, casting a crimson glow over the winding rivers and endless plains. A gentle wind sweeps across the golden dunes, carrying the breath of history, of dreams that have never died. In the distance, the ancient Nubian pyramids stand firm amidst the desert, like silent guardians of the past's hidden secrets. But today, those secrets are no longer buried. The forgotten stories are being retold, the distorted truths are being corrected, and the honor of a people once stripped of their dignity is being restored. The journey through history. Looking back on the course of history, we cannot ignore the scars left by time. The descendants of Ham, the Kushites, who once ruled the lands of the Nile, conquered Egypt, and built magnificent cities, have endured centuries of turmoil. They not only faced invaders but were also submerged in lies created to serve the interests of the oppressors. They were wrongly labeled as cursed, forced into slavery, and denied their rightful place in history. But while history can be manipulated, it can never be erased forever. What was concealed will be revealed, and justice will always find its way back. The dawn of restoration. Today, we witness a restoration, not just of a people but of humanity itself. New chapters of history are being written with fairness and dignity. Scholars, theologians, and activists have spoken out, exposing the misconceptions and reclaiming the truth for those falsely accused by history. They have proven that Noah's curse was never upon the Kushites, that the Bible never stated that black people were destined for slavery. They have restored the image of a powerful people, a nation that once ruled kingdoms, whose name was mentioned in the Bible not with contempt but with respect. A legacy that lives on. The heritage of the Kushites still stands, not only in their monumental structures but also in the blood of their descendants today. They are not merely witnesses of history, they are the ones continuing the story. From nations across Africa to black communities around the world, they are reclaiming their rightful place, standing tall with pride in their origins. They are no longer the forgotten, but the guardians of an extraordinary legacy, a story of perseverance and an unbreakable will, a lesson for the future. But this story is not just about the past. It is a reminder that history can be manipulated, but justice cannot be erased. It is a lesson in unity, in respect among nations, in learning from the mistakes of the past to build a better future. No people are born to be slaves. No one is cursed because of their skin color. All of humanity has the right to live in freedom, to be treated with dignity and justice. The world continues to change, but the wounds of the past remain. We can choose to ignore them, or we can learn from them, ensuring that the mistakes of the past are never repeated. The future cannot be built on lies, only on truth, harmony, and mutual respect. And in that future, the descendants of Ham, of Kush, of the great African civilizations, will no longer be remembered as the cursed, but as a people who shaped history. Writing a new story. Under the starlit African sky, where stories are still told by firelight, where the rivers continue to flow like the unbroken pulse of history, legends of kings, warriors, and scholars are passed down from generation to generation. And when today's generation looks back, they no longer see chains. They no longer hear false curses. Instead, they see pride. They see strength. They see the resilience of their ancestors. History may have forgotten them, but they never forgot themselves. And today they are rewriting their story, a story no longer of pain but of revival, no longer of oppression but of justice, no longer of division but of the unity of all humanity. Are you a fan of Black stories about God? If you like, please comment Amen below the article so we can create more good content.